Good evening, everybody. So welcome to Sutra Saturday with Tressa, now Nabila. I'm legally changing my name, so you'll see my new name there. So tonight, my plan is to start in the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali at the point where we start to talk about the 8 limbs of yoga. So I hope you're as excited as I am because I do love talking about the Yoga Sutras. I love yoga philosophy. And I really do believe that the Yoga Sutras are a guidebook or it outlines a path to living in this world today and back in ancient times when it was first created. The book is as relevant then as it is now, believe it or not. So the thing is that sometimes we have to get past some of the, or not get past, but you have to go deeper into the reading, meditating on the sutras themselves. And also I really highly recommend chanting the sutras so that you can really start to embody the language of yoga with Sanskrit, because it really does have a wonderful vibration that's very healing. So that's the thing, is we can't just read the Yoga Sutras, put it aside and say, well, I read it. No, this is a daily practice where you would pick up the Yoga Sutras or the Bhagavad Gita or the Upanishads, and you read a little bit and see what it means for you that day. Where are you feeling in your body? So it's very much that same practice that you would do with your asana, but instead you would be meditating on these teachings. So back to my original thought there, because I could go on a tangent when it comes to the Yoga Sutras. So before we start, let's go ahead and tune in, and then we'll get started with our discussion. So go ahead and close your eyes, bring in your mind, your body into the present moment. Sitting up nice and tall, whether or not you're sitting on the floor or if you're sitting in a chair. Then allow yourself to be grounded and making that connection with the earth. So if you're sitting in a chair, you'll feel the earth or the floor underneath supporting your feet. And just begin to notice how that feels, where you feel it in your feet. And then moving up your legs, notice how your legs feel tonight, your knees, your upper thighs. And then bring your attention to your sits bones, so the bones underneath your buttocks. So whatever surface you're sitting on, see if you can feel that connection to the surface. And also notice how you feel from right to left, how balanced you feel. And bringing your attention to your belly, your ribs, your breathing. Notice the flow of your in-breaths and your exhales. And we're bringing in that life force. We're bringing in teachings. These teachings are still very much alive. So breathing in and breathing out. Relax your shoulders and relax the muscles around your face. Bring them to a state of ease, being open and receptive. And finally, coming up to the top of your head, your crown chakra, and allowing that energy to flow through the top of your head, all the way down your spine, through your legs, and into the earth through your feet. So we're feeling very grounded, and we're ready for our practice tonight. The practice of studying the Yoga Sutras, the practice of Raja Yoga, the wisdom yoga. And then bring your hands up into Anjali Mudra, prayer position with your thumbs at your breastbone. And then slowly bow to the wisdom and the connection to the divine within your heart center. Taking another couple deep breaths in and out. And on the exhale, bring your hands down to your lap and then open up your eyes if they're closed. Okay, so let's get started. All right, so we're bringing our attention to specifically Yoga Sutras 2.28 and 2.29. So that's Pada 2. So that's book 2. Sutras 28 and 29, and if you remember from the first week, sutra means suture or thread, and I also use that analogy of when I'm talking about sutras, and the thread is like a bead string. So you start off with the supporting structure, which is the thread. And then throughout your life, you add on the beads, which are the nuggets or the knowledge that you learn from your gurus throughout your life. And a guru could be anybody or anything that brings you new wisdom or brings you into that point of like, aha, or the light bulb goes off. So we'll talk about gurus at another point because that is an important distinction. So again, those beads are that wisdom that we gain through our life. The sutras are the thread, the outline, the supporting structure that helps us guide us through this world and helps us with the ups and downs as we frequently have. So these outline the Ashtanga yoga, or the 8 limbs of yoga. So 28 and 29. And now if you break down the word Ashtanga, Ashta, which means 8, and Angani, which means limbs. So it's 8 limbs. Now, a lot of people, they'll hear the word Ashtanga and they'll think about that style of yoga, which is very vigorous, and it has a certain amount of, I'm not sure how many poses, but it's the same poses over and over in a sequence. But actually, Ashtanga yoga is the 8 limb path, and that's what it literally means. So we're going to break down each of those 8 limbs in a little bit of detail. But if you want to gain more insight into each of them individually, they have their own sutras, and I have them listed on the handout I'll send you. So basically 28 and 29, the sutras 228 to 229 outline what those are, the 8 limbs of yoga, and why we practice them. And then from 230 to 245, Patanjali goes into greater detail of each of those limbs. So in Sutra 228, I have 3 different quotes here that I would like to share with you. The first one from Swami Satchidananda says, "By the practice of the limbs of yoga, the impurities dwindle, and there dawns the light of wisdom, leading to discriminative discernment." So we practice these limbs of yoga to help us clear the way for wisdom, enlightenment, and also discerning what is appropriate for us in our life and what isn't. Another quote is from Nishala Joy Devi. "By embracing Ashtanga yoga, the 8-faceted path, intuitive wisdom dawns and reveals our inner radiance." So again, you can see where that once we go through these 8 limbs or work these in our life, because really the 8 limbs are not something you just have a little checklist. You just don't go through, oh, okay, I did limb 1, now it's done. No, this is throughout your life. You're always practicing these, and you can bounce from one to another. So the thing is, when we're working this 8-limb path, that we start to clear the way for clear discernment and also seeing ourselves for what we truly are. So it does really clear that path. And so that's why we do yoga. So another quote I have here is from Nikolai Bachman. From practicing the 8 limbs of yoga, when impurities are eliminated, we experience the light of knowledge, leading to viveka. So viveka is that what that means in Sanskrit is, again, that's that discrimination that we start to learn, that we can start to see ourselves as our true nature instead of seeing and reflecting what we see around us or external factors. So that is the difference when we start to live this path of yoga, that we start to be able to see things a little bit clearer. So when we talked about in week 1 is about that light and or any kind of water. So when it's just perfectly still, there's no wind, it's no waves or anything like that, then the water sits still and it's like a mirror. It's a mirror or a sheet of glass, and it's clear and you can see your true self. You can see what is true and what is not, and you can discern the truth. But as soon as you start putting those vrittis in there, which we talked about in week 1, once we put those little fluctuations in our mind, anything that's disturbing that peace, then it starts to form ripples and we start being unable to discern the truth. It is clear. So that's what this path of yoga takes us on. So in Sutra 229, the 8 limbs of yoga are outlined. And we'll go through these kind of slowly because I really want you to begin to realize the depth of this path. So we're starting off with the first limb of yoga, which is the yamas. So the yamas are a reflection of our true nature or the greater truth. And I like to think about how that we not only we can interact with the world, but also how we're interacting with ourselves in a lot of cases. So like for the first one, we have 5 yamas and 5 niyamas. Those are the first 2 limbs. So the 5 yamas are ahimsa, satya, asteya, brahmacharya, and aparigraha. So those are the 5 yamas. So if you look at the first one, ahimsa. Ahimsa is loving compassion for others as well as yourself. So it's extending that beyond yourself and to other people. So traditionally you'll hear ahimsa being non-harming, but it's not just physical violence or other types of violence. It's also in thought, word, or deed. So even thinking about someone that in a way that is not kind will go against this first yama of ahimsa. Another great example is if, say, you're in yoga class and the teacher has you go into a pose and you're in a lot of pain, but you do it anyway, no matter what, and the teacher's like, no, you got to do it, but you still don't listen to your inner voice. It's saying you're in a lot of pain, you do it anyway and you hurt yourself. It's not practicing ahimsa. We need to, while we're practicing, finding out what works for us and what does not, what is harming and what is not harming. So thought, word, or deed. So any of those things could be hurtful or not kind. So I think that's one of the hardest things, is finding those loving compassion moments for ourselves. And you can even think about, if you look in the mirror and you're like, oh, I don't like what I look like. I've gained a lot of weight because I'm on the quarantine. I've been going through quarantine and I put on 15 pounds or whatever and I look horrible. That's not being kind to yourself. That's not practicing love and compassion. So ahimsa, practicing ahimsa, and see how you can turn that around a little bit. But through these practices, the longer you practice and the more consistent you practice, these will become more apparent to you. You're like, oh, okay, I'm not being real kind to myself. Maybe I could turn that around. Or maybe I need to reach out to someone that can help me work through what I'm thinking about myself. And of course it can mean a physical thing as well. And then there's satya, which is truthfulness and integrity. Yes, even the little white lies are here. So trying to be truthful and have integrity. So again, this could be with other people and it could be with yourself. Because a lot of times we definitely lie to ourselves. We lie about what we want in our life. It's like how many times, especially if you're a yes person, which I was for many years, it's like always saying yes to things and not being truthful of our own time and our own energy. So saying no is hard to do, but if we're practicing satya and truthfulness, then we might admit to ourselves, no, I don't have enough time for that. I would really love to, and I really appreciate you asking, but I'm unable to do it at this time. So that's truthfulness. Asteya, non-stealing. So this could be material possessions, it could be someone's time or energy. So even showing up late when you have an appointment with someone, that's not practicing asteya. That's impeding on their time. Or even a yoga instructor who might go over in their time at a class without first checking with their student, that could be going against the stay as well, because we're taking other people's time. So that again could apply to yourself. It could apply with interacting with other people. The next one is brahmacharya, and traditionally it did mean a chastity or really harnessing that sexual energy and not using it too much. So it was really about being responsible with that sexual energy. But now, but we can translate it as that, but also finding moderation in our vital life force. So really taking a little bit of a work-life balance, trying to be aware of how much energy we expend with others, with ourselves, maybe not having so much time doing unhealthy things. So really making sure that we don't use up all our vital life force energy, and also making sure we have enough sleep. So self-care regimens are very, very important, because if we don't have enough of that life force, then we're out, we're going to get sick, and we don't really serve others very well that way. So the next one is aparigraha. And that means non-clinging, non-possessiveness, being happy with what you have. So that's where you get into that greed, hoarders, that show. Yeah, that's a parigraha right there. So not holding on so much. And there are, according to Ayurveda, there are certain doshas that have a little bit more of a tendency towards this attachment and this clinginess. So that would be the kapha type of personality, because it's made out of, their elements are water and earth. So that's a very clingy element right there. So we have a more tendency towards having too many possessions, clinging on to people or things and not letting it go. So we can start to remedy that by starting to, weed out things in our lives that no longer serve us. So that's a great way to work with that is to practice aparigraha, or non-possessiveness. So again, we have the 5 yamas, and that's the first limb of yoga, and that is ahimsa, satya, asteya, brahmacharya, and aparigraha. So next limit is the niyama list. And this is really more about your own self, discovering yourself, self-care, your pathway to finding the wholeness and connecting with the divine. So it is also that relationship between you and your divine consciousness. So the 5 niyamas, so we have 5 yamas, we have 5 niyamas. So the 5 niyamas are saucha, santosha, tapas, svadhyaya, and ishvara pranidhana. So the first one, saucha, is practicing internal cleanliness, simplicity, pure refinement. So it's really about cleaning up your mind and start to bring in thoughts that are clean, being mindful of the information we're bringing in through our senses. So maybe not watching horror movies at 11 o'clock at night, that kind of thing, or being on social media too long. So really practicing that internal cleanliness. It can mean outside cleanliness too, but really we're talking about cleaning up our chitta, our mind field. So really being aware of what we're bringing in through our senses that would start to cause those ripples that we were talking about in the lake. The next one is santosha. So that kind of goes along with the aparigraha a little bit, I think. It's about contentment and being at peace with yourself and with others, and being at peace with what you have in life. So it's really about that, being happy with what you've got. Being happy with what you got. Tapas is self-control of your energy and being fully committed to your practice, because tapas is about that heat, that burning drive to continue to practice, and it is all about that tapas. So tapas is really about that heat. It's not a small little meal that you get at a restaurant. I just had to put it out there. Okay. Svadhyaya, which is self-study. It could also be the sacred study of the divine through scripture, nature, and introspection. So anything that you, even studying the sutras or the sutras, see, I want to say sutra, yeah. So svadhyaya is really about learning about the divine, really studying and starting to develop that relationship between you and the divine, even getting out in nature, spending time where it's quiet and peaceful so that you can really reflect on yourself. And journaling is a great way to practice svadhyaya. So any kind of reflection like that, taking a retreat, spending time with yourself. And that is very hard for a lot of people to do. And the next one is Ishvara Pranidhana, which is the wholehearted dedication to the divine. And that is really getting in touch with the divine, whatever that means for you. It could mean anything. Your vision of God, divine, spirit, Goddess, Buddha, Allah, Jesus, it all goes hand in hand there. Wherever that you feel like feels comfortable in your body, being dedicated to something that's within that bright shining light of awareness. We all have it. It's all in our heart center right here. It's right here. So when we practice this this particular niyama, what we're doing is we're recognizing that there is a power out there that is greater than us, which really does help us become a little bit more modest and humble and have a little bit of humility. And so we don't think we're all that in a bag of chips. So that's what this niyama is for. So the next limb of yoga is we finally get to asana, which is our posture practice. It's the physical practice. They don't spend a lot of time talking about the asana part of yoga in great detail in the Yoga Sutras. I think there's only two sutras that mention asana. But it is important because it is a physical practice that helps us begin to tone the body, take care of the body so that we can do all these other practices. Because if we don't have the postures, we get a little creaky, and it's hard to sit in meditation. It's hard to breathe and practice pranayama. And it's hard to sit with ourselves and have any kind of introspection if we're in pain or we're in discomfort. So asana helps to tone the body and prepare it for other practices. So it is still a very integral part of yoga. So that's the next limb. The next limb after that is pranayama, which is the last of the external practices. So we had all the yamas, the niyamas, the asana and pranayama. Those are all the external practices of yoga in the 8 limbs. So pranayama is considered breath regulation, regulation of the prana or life force. A lot of people say breath control, but I don't know. It's for me, it feels like with the breath doesn't want to be controlled. It wants to be, it wants to work in partnership with us and being regulated. And it really does want to work with us. So I don't know if I like the breath control idea the best, but it's more something, a tool that we can work with to help to bring that vital energy throughout the body, and also to help clear up the chakras and unblock any energy channels. So it is a really wonderful tool that we have in our life from the moment we're born until the day we die. We have the breath with us at all times. It's a great friend, a great tool to use. And so I like to think of it as regulation more than anything else, but it is something that we can train ourselves to use. And there's so many different pranayama practices, and they're all good for certain things. And so that is the last of the external practices. And then we have a transitional limb. So this takes us from the external, and then we start to do all our internal work. So the transitional limb is pratyahara. A lot of people consider it the forgotten limb because it is kind of that in between, that point between turning inward from the outside world. So I like the quote that I have here for Judith Lassiter. In a world of information overload, the yoga practice of pratyahara offers us a haven of silence. So pratyahara, turning inward, that's the first step, the sensory withdrawal. So starting to tune down a little bit. It's where we start to prepare. We start to minimize the distractions around us. And we can even do that in our room that we practice our yoga, our asana, is we can start to maybe remove some of the distractions so that we can focus on a point. It could be an altar. It could be So minimize the distractions around us so that we can practice wholeheartedly. Turning off your phone, closing your door when you practice, whatever you need to do to start to turn inward. And this could also be applied to other parts of your life as well. So even when you're doing a task, is to try to minimize your distractions so that you can focus on that task. And a lot of times some people, they don't do that and they can get harmed because, you know, you're trying to do 10 things at once and nothing gets done, or you might end up hurting yourself. So we're trying to minimize the distractions. So turning off those electronic devices before you go to bed, minimizing all that input into your senses so that you can sleep well is very important. Pratyahara. So the next is dharana, which is concentration, a steady focus, keeping your mind on one idea or object. And of course, in this world, in this culture, it is not something that we do. We are a society that thrives on being a multitasker. Multitaskers are put on a pedestal, but it doesn't last. I was one of the biggest multitaskers in the whole planet. I mean, I remember working when I worked at the hospital up north, I would have 2 screens going on. I would have a laptop over here. So I had so many different things and I was wearing so many hats, and it really did a number on me. So trying to bring that focus into that one-pointed focus. And one of the great practices of yoga to help with that is candle gazing, or trataka. So that is a very good way to practice that. It's very relaxing. So just lighting a candle, focusing on that little one-pointed focus will help to keep the mind steady. You can also use that in addition to your pranayama, so that they can keep your mind really occupied. You can also use a sacred object, a statue, or a photograph of something inspiring, maybe making a little altar with some of your more uplifting spiritual items. That's always a great way to have something to concentrate on. So keeping your mind on one idea or object is dharana. That is our first inward practice of yoga, the 8 limbs of yoga. The next one is dhyana, and that's concentration and meditation on a point of focus with the intention of knowing the truth about it. A state where one can realize the difference between real and unreal. So this is where we start getting into our meditation practice that goes even deeper. So that is when our lake starts to really calm down, and we can start to discern between. So imagine you have all these thoughts going on in your mind, and we already know that the mind can get us in a lot of trouble because we can't really tell what's real or unreal. So when we get to the point where we've withdrew from our senses, we start focusing, and we can start finding that point where we're start getting into a meditation state, and we can start to see what the truth is a little bit easier, and we can see what's real and what's not real. Because that is a great thing to do anyways, is when you have these thoughts, especially if they start getting squirrely on you, is sit there and go, where is that coming from? Is it coming from my head, or is it coming from my heart? Really think about that. Maybe write it down. Meditate on it. Is it real or unreal? And it's surprising, really, how much garbage goes on in our head. So that is dhyana. And then the last one is samadhi. as the final limb. Now, a lot of people have the idea that samadhi is something that is this big lofty thing where, you know, you'll never get to it in a lifetime because it's the super ultimate absorption, super conscious state where we're basically one with our divine consciousness. Yes, you know, that might be a point where we're permanently there, but we do see glimpses of that. You know, maybe, I mean, I don't know if you've ever been into the point where you're like sitting around a campfire and you get so chill that, you know, you're just gone. You know, you're just gone. You're just totally chill. And that is a little part of samadhi. Also, if you've gotten wrapped up in like a craft project or playing piano or something like that, and you get to that point where you're so joyful and, you know, you're not thinking of anything else, and you can feel everything with your whole body, your whole soul. That's a glimpse of samadhi. I mean, I personally felt that when I've participated in a kirtan, practicing bhakti yoga, where I can really feel every part of my soul is really connecting with the divine. And it's pretty amazing just having a little glimpse of it, just little baby glimpses of it. It's pretty awesome. So that is samadhi. So that is our union with the divine consciousness. And to recap, basically that all these limbs, again, are not like a big checklist. So you don't have to say, well, I completed all of this today. No, these are just a roadmap that you can visit and touch upon and incorporate it into your life. And they take work. They do take work, but they do really outline the good path of living in this lifetime. So let's review. So we have the 8 limbs of yoga, the 8 path limb of yoga. And when I send you out this handout, it's got a lovely picture of a tree and it has all the limbs on it. So you'll be able to refer to it. So the first one again is the yamas. And that's really thought of mostly as how we interact with the world. However, a lot of them we can translate into how we treat ourselves as well, because we are part of this world. So we have under the yamas, we have ahimsa, non-harming, satya, truth-telling, brahmacharya, moderation of our energy, asteya, not stealing, and aparigraha, which is non-attachment or non-hoarding. And then the second limb, as a review, niyama. Those are our personal observances. That's where we start working on ourselves. So we have satya, which is cleanliness, santosha, which is contentment, tapas is that zest for life, that drive, that burning drive to practice. Svadhyaya, which is our self-study. Ishvara pranadhana, which is, that's the surrender to that divine or that life, that consciousness that is greater than ourselves, so we can practice our humility. So we don't want the ego to get out of hand, which is easy to do. The third limb is asana. That's our postures. Limb number 4 is pranayama. That's our breath regulation. So that's where we start working with the breath and starting to regulate our prana, which is our life force. Limb number 5 is pratyahara. That's our forgotten limb. That's when we start to turn inward. So we've moved away from the external practices of yoga, And now we're starting to turn inward. So this is our turning point inward. So pratyahara, which is withdraw from the senses. So we start moving away from those sensory input and starting to quiet the atmosphere around us so that we can prepare for that inward work. The sixth limb is dharana. So that's where we start to concentrate and start to bring our focus into focus. So we start to, if you think of a telescope, as we start to bring the images into focus through dharana. So that's our concentration. And remember, one of our practices of dharana is like a trattika. So it's bringing our focus onto a candle, perhaps, or a sacred object. You can even hold on to a stone, whatever you would like, anything to start to bring that into focus. And then from there, we start going a little deeper into our meditation through dhyana. So that's where we get into our meditative practice, where we start discerning what is real and what is unreal in our lives. And then the final limb is samadhi. So that's where we become one with all things. We become one with nature. We become one with the divine. Everything's just humming right along. And it's a wonderful feeling. And remember, we don't have to wait for this. This happens in glimpses. So you might experience this at times when you just forget that you're even here sometimes because you're so enthralled in what you're doing. That's samadhi. That's samadhi, when you're really caught up in the moment. That is samadhi. So those are the 8 limbs of yoga in review. And again, that's something that we could really, really, really talk about for a long time. But I just want to give you an overview of that. So you will find those in your Yoga Sutra books. 2, so it's Pada 2, 28 is the Sutra, and Sutra 229. So those are where the sutras are outlined. 229 is where they're outlined. 228 tells us why we actually follow the path. And if you remember, if by following this path that our intuition is enhanced, we start revealing our true nature, our inner radiance starts shining through, our impurities start dwindling, we just become cleaner in our thoughts and our actions. And we start to be able to discern, again, what is real and what is not. I'm so sorry about that. So I am so glad you joined me this week. So next week, I'll be starting to talk about the kleshas and how they come into our life. Oh, sorry about that. I'm starting to lose my voice a little bit. So we'll be talking about the kleshas next week, and I will put what sutras we're going to be working on when we talk about that. So the kleshas are our afflictions and what they cause suffering. And we'll talk about that a little bit. We'll talk about some examples and we'll go from there. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your weekend. I'm going to close with another brief meditation. So go ahead and we'll close out. So you can either lie in a shavasana, so lying on the ground, or you can sit in a comfortable position. Eyes can be closed, but if that is not appropriate for you, then you could softly gaze down towards the floor or focus on the eyebrows, right in between the eyebrows, the third eye. So you can have your hands on your thighs And we'll do a brief yoga nidra to end the practice. So come to a nice comfortable position, whether you're lying or sitting. And from here, what I'd like you to do is scrunch up your toes and your feet. Scrunch them up. And then let them go. And then start to tense up your calves and your knees. Really tense up those parts of your body. And then release. Moving up to your tops of your thighs and your buttocks. Give them a nice squeeze. And then release. Inhale completely until your belly balloons up. Hold it. And then release. Breathe into your upper chest, filling up your lungs. And release. Bring your shoulders up towards your ears. And then let them drop suddenly. Moving down to your hands, ball up your fists. Squeeze. And release. Tense up your lower arms and your elbows. And release. Tensing up your upper arms, tops of your shoulders. And release. And then make a face like you just sucked a lemon. Really scrunch up the face. And release. Make a kissy face like a fish. Really purse the lips. And then release. Open up the mouth real wide. And release. Scrunch up the eyes. And release. So let the whole body release. Sinking deeper into the surface you're sitting or lying on. Taking in all the teachings from tonight's session, allowing them to all sink in. And now imagine a beautiful radiant blue star right in the area between your eyebrows, right in your third eye, Ajna chakra, right in the third eye. So that beautiful blue star is radiating everywhere. Maintain your attention on there as you breathe in and breathe out. Now bring your attention to your throat, right at your throat center. Again, imagine that beautiful blue star, a beautiful light right at your throat chakra, Vishuddha. And now bring your attention to your heart center, placing your hands one over the other on your heart chakra, tuning into the heartbeat, tuning into the warmth under your hands, and also to the breath as it comes in and out of your body. Focusing on that area. And in your mind's eye, imagine that you are finding that lake that we're talking about. It's at night, so the surface looks black. And in the distance, you can see a big, bright full moon. So breathing in and breathing out. Feeling the warmth of your hands. And then bring your hands back down to your lap. And then slowly start to bring your attention back to your space, back to the room. And then we'll close with 3 ohms. Bring our hands back into Anjali Mudra, the heart center. Taking an inhale in. All blessings. Satnam.